They had a contest for what they could call this thing.
Every year on Memorial Day weekend, the past awakens in southern Indiana. You hear the thundering crack of muskets. You smell wood smoke, leather, corn roasting over fire. You see soldiers, artisans, and children all stepping into another time. This is the Spirit of Vincennes Rendezvous. It's one of Indiana's largest Revolutionary War reenactments, drawing in thousands of people. Although Vincennes did not invent historical pageantry, it's been doing it for over a century.
As early as 1916, we put on a very elaborate pageant down by the Wabash River. The American Legion built the facade of a fort and rented all kinds of costumes from Chicago and dressed up all the local citizens. And they had French dances and Indian dances, and then George Rogers Clark, and the capture of Vincennes, and then later on Tecumseh.
Throughout the years, many pageants and festivals came and went. But in 1976, everything changed.
There were 5 people that were recruited by Dr. Isaac Beckus, who was the president of Vincennes University, and he wanted to have some event that represented Vincennes and the university as well, for the Bicentennial, the national celebration in 1976. And so he picked Augie Schulteis, who was a member of his faculty on the campus. There was Junior Fisher and his wife that were local reenactors, that were candlestick makers. And then Marshall Miller, who was also kind of a well-known business person in the community. And then Mary Gladys Wheeler, whose early work was with the housing department in Vincennes, but she was also very well connected. So these 5 people came together and helped produce that original rendezvous, which was called something different at the time.
In 1977, they staged the battle over there on the VU campus. They also then, of course, had the encampment again over at the Clark Memorial, and they would, after the battles, would march of the mile to the Clark Memorial and their tents and all.
The next step was to give it a name and find a permanent home.
Of the success of this program they had, they decided to incorporate so that they could receive funds and disperse funds. They had a contest for what they could call this thing, and someone suggested that they call it the Spirit of Vincennes. And there were some that wanted to call it the Vincennes Rendezvous, so they came up with that, well, we'll call it the Spirit of Vincennes Rendezvous. Finally, in 1980, they persuaded the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad, which had a railroad siding running along parallel with Willow Street, to grant them to the 60-foot right-of-way from Willow Street back. And that was enough ground for them to stage a rather truncated kind of Revolutionary War battles. There had been a factory there. They had to plant trees, had to remove the rails and the ties from the railroad siding. They had to take that all down. And they also then initiated a program of building sheds for the different food groups that were going to come in there.
The rendezvous was growing, but in its early days, it looked a bit different than it does now.
They had canoe races, really big canoes, but of course they weren't able to continue that because it's a lot of work to paddle a canoe all the way down the Wabash from up north.
Our original merchants and trader people and our original entertainment people would basically do anything to draw a crowd, you know. So we had the Hoosier Harmonizers, which were barbershop quartets basically that sang on the stage. We had cloggers, and we had infamously the Glitter Girls and some people that came on stage because our entertainment director at the time thought, well, their parents, their grandparents, or aunts and uncles will all come to watch them perform. Well, those things were attracting people to our event, but they really weren't authentic to that period. But we did it because it drew in, our crowd at the time was local.
In time, the focus shifted. More accuracy, more authenticity, a push to take the rendezvous beyond Vincennes to the national stage.
As we became more historically accurate, you really saw a growth in the number of people that came from a wider area. Because people liked coming here because it was truly authentic.
And it paid off.
It started out, I remember, it was just a few thousand people, and then within 10 years it was up around 20,000, and since then I think it's reached a peak of around 40,000 a year.
Then, in 2020, everything went silent. No smoke, no marching, no history.
We decided it would be best not to have the festival. We did a Facebook Live kind of announcement about that between myself and our attendance director to kind of let people know what was happening. This should be our 49th, and next year would be our 50th anniversary, but we did take a year off for COVID.
But the rendezvous returned, just as vibrant, just as dedicated as ever. For the people who keep this rendezvous alive, it's more than just an event.
This is sacred ground. Next to the old cathedral are soldiers of Clark's that are buried in that French and Indian burial ground. So there is that kind of history. They sense and they feel, and when they represent the people they're representing, they know directly the tie-in to them.
For some, it's a chance to honor the fallen. For others, it's about sharing their passion.
I myself would demonstrate calligraphy, and I would make bookmarks for people, free bookmarks with their name and choice, 16th century Italian italic. And that was one of the few things you could get at the rendezvous that was absolutely free. Loved doing that.
Well, personally, I've always been a fan of history. My father, he was voluminous in his reading about history. When I was in middle school, in the Catholic schools, I gave tours of the old cathedral and the library. My enamoring of that kind of whole time period was always fresh in my mind, and so when this opportunity came up, I leaped at it because it was just directly tied into what I loved.
You have a lot of these reenactors from the 1970s and 80s that were very young and lithe and all that, like me, and then as the years go on, they're getting kind of old, and trying to pass it on to the next generation with some degree of success, but not as much as you would hope. There don't seem to be as many reenactors, I think, as there were in the past. Maybe 250th anniversary of the 4th of July, 1776, next year will rejuvenate them and increase the enthusiasm, just as the Bicentennial did back in 1976.
From the sounds of muskets firing to the smell of sweet pies, the spirit of Vincennes lives on. And as long as people remember and return, the past will never truly be gone.